Genesis 1:29 might be the most overlooked verse in the entire Bible when it comes to what we put on our plates. God literally says, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food." Today, we're diving deep into Christian veganism, specifically how the Genesis 1 diet connects to modern plant-based living, a practical 6-month transition plan that actually works, and why science is now proving what Scripture suggested thousands of years ago about the power of plants. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how to align your faith with your food choices and have a roadmap to transform your health through biblical eating principles. Let me bring in someone who's been studying this intersection of faith and food for years to help us unpack what the Bible actually says about our dietary choices.
You know, when most Christians read Genesis, they focus on the creation story, but they completely miss that God's original design for human nutrition was entirely plant-based. According to Christianity Path's analysis of 31 biblical verses on veganism, Genesis 1:29 represents God's initial intent for human dietary choices, highlighting that God provided plants as food for humanity.
Wait, so you're saying the very first diet God prescribed was vegan?
Exactly. And it wasn't just for humans. Genesis 1:30 says, "To every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." The entire creation was originally vegetarian.
That's incredible. But then what happened? When did meat enter the picture?
According to Focus on the Family's biblical analysis, the strictly vegetarian program was lifted after the flood. In Genesis 9:3, God told Noah, "Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you, and as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything." But here's the key, this was a concession, not the original plan.
So it was like a backup plan after everything went wrong?
That's one way to look at it. And then later, the Levitical laws in Leviticus 11 made distinctions between clean and unclean animals. According to Bible Hub's analysis, these laws served both practical and spiritual purposes. They promoted health and hygiene by prohibiting consumption of animals more likely to carry disease.
Interesting. So even when meat was allowed, there were serious restrictions. But let's get practical here. If someone feels called to return to that Genesis 1 diet, how do they actually make that transition without completely overwhelming themselves?
Great question. The research shows that gradual replacement beats overnight elimination by every measure. According to Stay Healthy Vegan's transition coaching data, a 30-day framework works best, but I'd actually recommend extending that to 6 months for a more sustainable approach.
6 months? That seems like a long time.
Actually, there's this fascinating YouTube channel called The Grace-Paced Raw Life, where a pastor's wife documents her 6-month raw vegan journey. She talks about overcoming health challenges like long-term fatigue and chronic pain, and how the process actually strengthened her faith rather than rushed it.
That's really cool. So what would month 1 look like for someone just starting?
According to the Cheat Meal Nutrition Guide, you start by identifying your motivation, whether it's health, environmental concerns, or in this case, spiritual alignment. Then you assess your kitchen inventory for naturally vegan foods you already have: oats, beans, pasta, rice, vegetables.
So you're not throwing out everything and starting from scratch.
Exactly. The Stay Healthy Vegan plan recommends starting with just breakfast. Pick 3 plant-based breakfasts you'll actually enjoy, like oatmeal with banana and peanut butter, or a smoothie bowl. And critically, start B12 supplementation from day 1.
B12, that's the big one everyone talks about, right?
Right. The International Journal of Epidemiology study on religious dietary rules found that vegan diets can result in vitamin B12, calcium, iron, zinc, and omega-3 fatty acid deficiencies if not properly planned. But with proper supplementation, these are completely manageable.
Okay, so month 1 is breakfast plus supplements. What about months 2 and 3?
Month 2, you add lunches and start exploring plant-based protein sources. The Cheat Meal Guide emphasizes that plant-based diets can provide plenty of protein through tofu, tempeh, lentils, quinoa, and chickpeas. Month 3, you tackle dinners 4 nights a week.
And then what? You're basically fully transitioned by month 4?
That's when you fine-tune everything and address any remaining challenges. The key principle from the research is add before you subtract. Introduce new plant-based meals before removing their animal-based counterparts. It prevents that feeling of deprivation.
That makes so much sense. But let's talk about the health side, because I keep hearing about these amazing immune-boosting properties of plants. What does the science actually say?
Oh, this is where it gets really exciting. According to a study published in Open Life Sciences, plant-based foods are considered beneficial for human health due to their supply of valuable nutrients, including health-promoting compounds that boost immunity against acute and chronic disorders.
But that's pretty general. Are there specific examples of how plants actually boost immunity?
Absolutely. Here's what blew my mind. Tokyo University of Science just published research showing that combining everyday plant compounds like menthol from mint, cineole from eucalyptus, and capsaicin from chili peppers can amplify their anti-inflammatory effects by hundreds of times.
Wait, hundreds of times? How is that even possible?
The compounds work together inside immune cells by activating different cellular pathways at once. While individual compounds showed modest effects, certain combinations created this incredible synergy. It's like the plants were designed to work together.
That's wild. And this connects back to the biblical idea of plants being our original food source?
Exactly. What's fascinating is that modern science is actually backing up ancient dietary wisdom. The Bible writers couldn't have known scientifically about phytochemicals and anti-inflammatory pathways, but they were given this blueprint that we're now discovering was incredibly sophisticated.
So when we read Psalm 104, 1, 15 about God making plants for people to cultivate, bringing forth food from the earth, there might be more to that than just basic nutrition?
Absolutely. And here's another angle, the clean and unclean animal laws in Leviticus. According to Bible study resources, these laws promoted health by prohibiting consumption of animals more likely to carry disease. Pigs, for example, don't have divided hooves and are scavengers.
The whole clean and unclean animals thing gets really interesting when you think about modern food safety, like pigs not having divided hooves, but also being scavengers that eat literally anything.
Right. And shellfish, no fins and scales, bottom feeders that filter toxins. The Welthungerhilfe research on meat consumption and religion notes that while relatively few negative health consequences have been documented for unprocessed meat, both obesity and increased cancer risk have been demonstrated from highly processed meat products.
So even the WHO is backing up some of these ancient dietary restrictions?
The 2018 WHO findings specifically linked highly processed meat products to obesity and increased cancer risk. And the International Journal of Epidemiology study found that in Jewish and Muslim observance, certain animal slaughtering procedures may actually increase the risk of iron deficiency.
Wow. So there are potential health risks even with clean meats, depending on how they're processed?
Exactly. And this is where the Genesis 1 diet starts looking really appealing from a purely health perspective, even setting aside the spiritual aspects. You're avoiding all the potential pathogen risks, processing concerns, and inflammatory issues associated with animal products.
But let's address the elephant in the room. What about Christians who say that Jesus declared all foods clean in the New Testament? How do you reconcile that with advocating for a plant-based diet?
Great question. According to Focus on the Family's analysis, when Jesus declared all foods clean in Mark 7, 1, 8, 19, and when Peter had his vision in Acts 10, these weren't primarily about dietary laws. They were about breaking down barriers between Jews and Gentiles.
So it was more about inclusion than about what's actually healthy to eat?
Exactly. And Paul emphasizes in Romans 14 that what we eat should not be a point of contention among believers. Bible Wisdom Hub notes that whether a Christian chooses to be vegan is a personal decision that should be made prayerfully and with consideration for biblical principles.
So it's about freedom of conscience, not a mandate either way?
Right. But here's what I find compelling. The Genesis 1 diet wasn't just about health. It was about humans and animals living in perfect harmony before the fall. Some Christians see returning to plant-based eating as a glimpse of the restored creation we're moving toward.
That's beautiful. Like Isaiah 11, 6, 7, where the wolf will live with the lamb and all that?
Exactly. According to Christianity Path's analysis, this perspective encourages us to consider how our food choices impact creation and the environment. Genesis 2:15 reminds us we're caretakers of creation, with a sacred duty to be stewards of the earth.
So it's not just about personal health, it's about caring for God's creation?
Absolutely. And the practical benefits are incredible. According to Gallup, nearly 3% of Americans identify as vegan, and the number continues to rise. A 2022 Statista survey found that 61% of vegans cited health as their top motivation for making the switch.
Those numbers are pretty significant. But let's get really practical for a minute. If someone listening right now feels convicted to try this, what's the very first step they should take?
Start with prayer and reflection on your motivations. Then stock a basic plant-based pantry. The Stay Healthy Vegan Guide recommends 25 core items like rolled oats, quinoa, lentils, chickpeas, plant milk, and basic spices. And order a B12 supplement.
And then just start with breakfast?
Exactly. Pick 3 breakfasts you'll actually enjoy and rotate through them. The research shows this frees up mental energy for making changes to lunch and dinner later. Don't try to revolutionize everything at once.
What about community? This seems like something that would be easier with support.
Absolutely. The Cheat Meal Guide recommends joining beginner-friendly groups like Vegan Beginners 101 on Facebook or the R and Vegan subreddit. And there are Christian-specific communities forming around this too.
That makes sense. Having people who understand both the faith aspect and the practical challenges would be huge.
And remember, the goal isn't perfection, it's progress. Even if you just reduce animal products significantly, you're moving in a direction that honors both your health and God's creation.
I love that perspective. So when you step back from all of this, the biblical foundation, the scientific evidence, the practical transition plans, what's the bigger picture here?
I think we're seeing a convergence of ancient wisdom and modern science that's pretty remarkable. The Genesis 1 diet that God originally prescribed is now being validated by research on plant compounds, immune function, and disease prevention.
And it's not just about following rules, it's about aligning our choices with our values and caring for the creation we've been entrusted with.
Exactly. Whether someone goes fully plant-based or just incorporates more Genesis 1 foods into their diet, they're participating in something that connects them to God's original design and to the future restoration of all things.
That's powerful. And here's what I find most compelling. You don't have to choose between faith and science, between spiritual conviction and practical health benefits. They're all pointing in the same direction.
Right. And with the 6-month transition plan, you have time to really experience the changes, not just in your physical health, but in your relationship with food, with creation, and potentially with God.
So here's your action step. If this resonates with you, start small. Pick one plant-based breakfast you'd actually enjoy eating. Stock your pantry with some basic whole foods. And maybe most importantly, spend some time reflecting on Genesis 1:29 and what God's original design for human nutrition might mean for your life today.
Remember, this isn't about legalism or judgment. It's about freedom to align your choices with your deepest values. And who knows? You might just discover that the diet God prescribed in the very beginning was exactly what your body and spirit needed all along. Thanks for joining us on Copilot Podcasts.